Test scores have fallen, parents are exhausted, a generation of students are struggling. Students need stability. They should be in the classroom with their teachers. Parents deserve nothing less. I want nothing more. So over the past 3 months, our government has been at the table with CUPE. We've been in discussions with all education unions. The entire team, our goal has been clear: to keep students in class. We've put forward a fair and reasonable offer, an offer that provides the largest increase in compensation for education workers in over a decade and protects the most generous benefits and pension plan in the entire country, along with 131 paid sick days. All we asked for was that they remove their threat to strike so kids could stay in class. For their part, CUPE demanded a nearly 12% annual raise. When combined with all other benefits, CUPE was demanding a nearly 50% increase in compensation. When CUPE didn't get what they were demanding, they gave notice they were going on strike. The times we find ourselves in after pandemic disruptions, it's an unprecedented situation that requires unprecedented solutions. That's why when a strike threatened further disruptions to close down schools, our government took action to stop the strike. We introduced the Keeping Students in Class Act, legislation meant to protect the right of kids to stay in class, to learn and prepare for their future. And we used the notwithstanding clause to ensure that happened. I know that it has been controversial. I've always respected the right of workers to fair and free bargaining. But CUPE refused to take strike action off the table, even when those strikes were illegal. I want to be clear. We didn't make the decision to introduce legislation lightly. We were left with no choice. Our desire has always been and remains to negotiate in good faith, to land agreements with education union partners. I'm proud of the work and the relationships our government has built with organized labor over the past 4 years. As a gesture of good faith, our government is willing to rescind the legislation. We're willing to rescind Section 33, but only if CUPE agrees to show a similar gesture of good faith by stopping their strike and letting our kids back into their classrooms. I urge CUPE to continue to talk with us at the bargaining table. We're willing to make a fair deal, one that offers more help for lower income workers. We want a deal that's fair for students, fair for workers, fair for parents, and fair for taxpayers. And we know we can get there. As stewards of taxpayers' dollars, we also have a responsibility to the entire province. A deal with CUPE has massive impacts on broader public service salaries, as well as the government's ability to invest in services like healthcare, transit, education, and hospital infrastructure, alongside other vital public services. These are complex discussions, especially given the economic climate we're in. Record high inflation, economic uncertainty, cost of living challenges that every family is facing. Right now, more than ever, when it comes to the province's finances, we need to be cautious and responsible, and we will. Now, I want to take a moment to speak directly to parents. I desperately hope that CUPE shows the same willingness to compromise as we are today. I hope they hear my plea to keep students in class. But that's not something I can guarantee you. That's something only CUPE can do. What I can guarantee you is that we will continue to do whatever we can to minimize disruption and get kids back to school as soon as possible. In the meantime, we have directed boards to keep as many schools open for as many students as possible and to offer remote learning when that is possible. I started this morning talking to you about our goal, to keep students in class. That goal hasn't changed because students have been through so much. They don't deserve to be caught in the middle of these negotiations. What they need and deserve is to be back in class so they can catch up on their learning. For the sake of our students, CUPE, please accept this offer. Take strike action off the table and let our kids back in class. Thank you, and God bless the people of Ontario. I'd be happy to take questions.
We'll now take questions one at a time from the microphone. If you could form a line behind me, it'll be one question and one follow-up per reporter.
Hi, Premier. Is this an admission that the government went too far by invoking Section 33 and that maybe that escalated it? Or is this a situation that CUPE escalated things and then you escalated things and then now we're at the stalemate, so you want to turn the temperature down?
Well, we just want CUPE to be at the table. They walked away from the table. We had no option but to use Section 33 to keep the kids in the classroom. That's my only priority right now, is to make sure the kids are in the classroom after almost 2.5 years of disruption on their physical, mental, and emotional health. They want to be with their friends in the classroom learning. I hear it every single day from kids. I hear it from parents. We need the kids back in classroom. We will negotiate fairly, but it's up to CUPE. They're the only ones that can do this.
Now, Premier, the CUPE has said that the lowest income workers, those earning less than $43,000 a year, can't make ends meet on the 2.5% offer. You mentioned in your remarks that you have concern about those low income workers. Are you willing to give a higher wage settlement to those lowest income workers affected?
Well, I'm willing to help the lower income people, the part-timers that work 194 days a year. Yeah, I'm always for helping the little guy, little gal. You know, I think I'm pretty easygoing, to be very frank. You know, I've been flexible. I think with union negotiations, we're at 98%. I want to help them, but we can't help them unless CUPE comes back to the table. It's absolutely critical. You just don't get up and walk away from the table when you're in the middle of negotiating. And I feel we can strike a deal, but they need to come back. They're the only ones that have the ability to have the kids back in the classroom. I'm willing to put a little water in my wine. I've never been shy to do that, but they need to do the same thing. It's not a one-way street here.
Morning, Premier. Liam Casey with the Canadian Press.
Good morning.
What if CUPE says no to your offer this morning? How does this end?
You know something? We're going to keep working to get the kids in the classroom. That's my #1 priority, to make sure that they can go and learn. My heart breaks for the parents that are running around that don't have daycare. I was talking to a grandfather last night that 4 of his grandchildren were dropped off at their home. And he said, I love my grandchildren, but these kids need to be back in the classroom.
Looking back at last week, do you wish you had handled anything differently, considering where we are right now with nobody in school?
Absolutely not. They're the ones who called the strike. They're the ones who walked away from the negotiating table. We're very flexible. It's amazing that we can get deals with 98% of other unions, but we can't with CUPE. Why? We're willing to sit down. I'm willing to rescind Section 33, but they have to go into the classroom. That's the deal. They have to go in, and only CUPE can do that.
Hi, Premier. Jeff Gray from the Globe and Mail. Have you been hearing from business leaders, particularly in the construction industry, who were expressing concerns to you about the possibility of wider labor disruption? Did they urge you to try and get back to the table and make a deal with CUPE?
I think every union I've talked to, and we have a great relationship with the private sector unions, you know, they want to make sure that their parents of the kids that are going to school can show up to the construction site. Because if CUPE continues to strike, then these parents won't be able to go to the construction sites. And that goes for people right across the province. You know, you can't disrupt and hold captive the whole province. They need to go back to the classroom. Simple.
Will you pledge not to use Section 33 again in a labor dispute?
Well, what we need to do is make sure, I'm not going to answer hypothetical questions, we have to make sure CUPE goes back into the classroom to teach the kids. I don't like using Section 33. Everyone knows I don't like it. But when you're left with no option, when CUPE comes to you and says, I want a 50% increase, which is absolutely ridiculous anywhere in this country, and by the way, if you don't give me 50%, I'm going to go out on strike, and I'm going to disrupt classes across this province. I'm going to disrupt over 1 million families and students that have been struggling over 2.5 years. We see it in their test scores. We see it right across the board. The kids need to get back into the classroom. It's very simple, and they have the levers to make that happen right now. I don't have the levers to make it happen. I, again, am offering to rescind Section 33, but only if they go back into the classroom. Let's get back to the table and let's negotiate a fair deal. And I'm very flexible with that.
Hey, good morning, Premier Colin DeMello with Global News. I'm going to marry a couple of issues here. So 4 years ago, you told the province that you were not going to touch the Greenbelt. 4 years later, we now know that you are going to reopen the Greenbelt. So for all of those CUPE education workers who are looking at your promises and what you say and whether you follow through on them, why should they actually believe you that you're going to pull that legislation back?
Well, Colin, first of all, thank you for the question. We're in an unprecedented time when it comes to housing. We have a housing crisis today that we didn't have 4 years ago. The federal government announced they're going to bring 500,000 new Canadians, immigrants to this country. And I welcome it. I'm out here all the time saying we need more people because we created the environment and the climate for our province to be moving forward and growing in the economy, unlike a lot of regions around the world. And since we've done that, we need 385,000 people to fill the jobs. And out of the 500,000 people showing up to Canada, we know, even though we're 40% or close to 40% of the population, 60% of those new Canadians, 300,000, are going to show up to Toronto and the GTA and the Greater Ontario area. Where are we going to put 300,000 people a year? Almost 1 million people in 3 years because of the inaction of previous governments that didn't want to take the bold steps to get housing built. We are going to make sure we get housing built.
This is a credibility question, though, Premier. The people of Ontario want to know if they can actually believe what you say just before an election you're actually going to follow through on. A lot of labor unions, as an example, are revolting against you. The 8 that supported you in the last election are now calling on you to withdraw Bill 28. So this is a credibility question. Why should the unions out there who are protesting actually believe what you say?
Do you know why they should believe it, Colin? Because they've never had a better partner ever than our government. We have worked hand in hand with them. We have poured money into training into the trades. We have worked it with every single private sector union. And you have to differentiate between the situation with CUPE and private sector unions. And there may be a couple things we may disagree on, but I'll tell you one thing, 95% of the things we agree on, making sure their workers have good paying jobs to work, making sure they're able to build the new hospitals, the $40 billion and 50 sites that we're building right now, making sure that they're able to go in and build long-term care homes, building the 413 and the Bradford bypass, building the largest expansion of subway systems in North America, the $30 billion, and making sure that they're able to build schools. And I'll just remind people, under the Liberal regime, these same workers got a 0% increase in 2012, 0% in 2015. They closed 600 schools with a great leadership of Minister Lecce, and I want to thank him for everything he has done up to this point and continues to do. We're building new schools across this province. We're hiring more educational workers and teachers right across this province at an unprecedented rate. We're going to continue to build this province.
Good morning, Premier. I'm Charlie Pinkerton from Queen's Park Briefing. You and others from your government have said that you've done everything in your power to help the Emergencies Act inquiry with its work. But its lawyers, they have said that there's still information that you and Sylvia Jones alone can provide by testifying. What are you afraid will come from testifying at that inquiry?
Well, I've said it. This is a federal inquiry based on the federal government calling for the Emergency Act. This is a federal issue. We've had our senior public service go there, the deputy. We've had the commissioner of the OPP there. This was under the police. I don't direct the police. This is something that falls under the police. The OPP sent police officers there, and they ended it. And so it's the federal government. It's not the provincial government.
Okay, and clearly your announcement today shows that things did not exactly go as planned for your government over these last few days and really the last week. So I'm hoping you can tell me who is to blame for the miscalculation that your government made.
Well, we'll respectfully disagree. This is nothing we did. This was on CUPE. And if you've ever been at the negotiating table, there's one thing you don't do as you're negotiating. You don't get up and walk out. You don't get up and walk out on 2 million kids and parents. You just don't do that. You sit down and you negotiate. You negotiate a fair deal until both parties can leave with a fair deal for the students, the parents, and all of Ontario. The people, the taxpayers of Ontario, are paying their wages. I have to make sure I'm a prudently fiscal manager of the taxpayers' money. I have to be a good steward with the taxpayers' money. And you just can't throw up and say, okay, guys, you're getting 50%. Then it affects a broader public service. And guess what? The government's bankrupt. But this is about making sure that the kids are in school. The reason we're making sure these workers are the highest paid in the entire country with the best benefits and pension plans anywhere in the country, plus 131 days, sick days. Because of that, I have no problem with that. They're the best in the country. So I have no issue supporting them on that side. But there's one thing we ask: stop the strike, get back into the classroom.
Premier, it's Richard Southern with City News 680. The union leadership had said on Friday they would be willing to stop the strike if you do rescind the bill, which you're offering today. Yep. Are you willing to put that in writing, Premier? And further to that, would your government agree to binding arbitration with CUPE?
What we want is to sit down at the table. I have put out a massive olive branch. I have said I will rescind Section 33 based on them going back into the classrooms, getting the kids back in the classrooms, and they can only control that. I can't control that. And once they do that, we sit down at the table and we negotiate a fair deal. Folks, eventually this has to come to an end. The only people CUPE is hurting are the kids right now by refusing to come to the table. We need them to come back and negotiate fairly like every other union in this country does. to the exception of CUPE.
For my follow-up, I want to go back to the Emergencies Act Committee. Your legal representation is arguing, Premier, that you testifying would cause irreparable harm. Can you tell us today what that irreparable harm is, sir?
You know, I guess that's legal talk. I can tell you one thing. This is a federal inquiry about the federal government using the Federal Emergency Act. It's not the province. This is a police matter. And we gave the police more tools to bring the occupation to an end. And that's what they did. This, again, I'll repeat it, this is a federal inquiry into the federal government's use of the Federal Emergencies Act. You know, we've provided hundreds of documents and key officials, but again, this is a federal inquiry.
This will be the last question.
Morning, Premier. Antonella Artuso from the Toronto Sun. Last week, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was highly critical of your use of the notwithstanding clause. He called it inappropriate and wrong. I'm wondering if his comments had any weight with you, what you thought of him diving into that issue.
Well, you know, the notwithstanding clause is a constitutional tool for provincial governments to use. It's well within our government's right to use this tool. We're using every tool we have to keep kids in class. And as for the Prime Minister, it's very disappointing the Prime Minister is being selective within certain provinces about his concerns of overturning the notwithstanding clause. If he wants to sit down with all the premiers and have a conversation about the Constitution, that's something he needs to decide for himself.
So are you open to that idea, taking a harder, new look at the notwithstanding clause and where it's appropriate to use it and where it's not?
If the Prime Minister wants to sit down and have a constitutional conversation with all the premiers, I can assure you all the premiers will be there to talk about the constitutional changes if he wants to go down that road. I'd highly recommend not to. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.